Welcome back to Illinois Lawmakers' weekly coverage of the spring session of the Illinois General Assembly. I'm Jak Tichenor along with Peter Hancock, State House reporter for our partner organization, Capital News Illinois. Peter, good to have you back.
Thanks, Jak.
As expected, this week's retirement announcement by Illinois Senior Senator Dick Durbin has sent shockwaves, ripples throughout the Illinois Democratic political establishment. The move was not entirely unexpected. If he ran and was elected, he would be 88 years old by the time he finished another term. The impact, though, is nonetheless profound. People have been lining up for this for months, if not years.
Yeah, and this is one of the things when you have someone who serves so long at a high-level position, is that pressure builds from underneath. All of these people are ambitious. They all want to move up the ladder. They all envision themselves as being a United States senator or a president or a congressman. But somebody at the top has to leave in order to make room for other people to move up. And so you're seeing this kind of chain reaction now. When he steps out of that seat, everybody wants to move up, starting with Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, who became the first person to make a formal announcement this week.
And of course, there are others that have been gathering money for this really for years. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, U.S. Representatives Lauren Underwood, Robin Kelly, also potential players, the state treasurer Mike Frericks. So
it's probably a shorter list if you just say who's not interested in running.
Yeah, and it was interesting hearing Senator Durbin being interviewed by WBEZ's Dave McKinney this week about the potential field of candidates. He said there may be many, many more expressing interest in this before it's all over.
Oh yeah, I think we're expecting at least a dozen or so. How many of those make it through the early fundraising period, the petition gathering period? The list will get winnowed down as we start moving toward the primary next year. And then, we'll see who comes out of it.
Durbin made it pretty clear he's not going to endorse anyone. Will the same be said of Governor Pritzker? Do we know?
I don't expect, personally, I don't expect Governor Pritzker to make an endorsement right now. It'll be interesting to see. I'm not sure we still live in the age of kingmakers anymore. I think there's just as much concern about coming out and endorsing somebody who ends up losing, and that makes the endorser look weak or out of touch with the voters. So
if anybody wants to do a quick picture,
the safe move for everybody is to just let the voters decide.
And of course, as this whole thing shakes out, it creates a lot of moves down the ticket for people running for Congress and running for State House, State Senate. It just has a lot of implications for a lot of different people all over the state.
Yeah, there's literally a chain reaction all the way down the political ladder. In order to run for the Senate seat, if you're a member of Congress, you have to give up your congressional seat. There are some people in the legislature who would have to give up their legislative seats in order to run for Congress. And so a lot of decisions have to be made. And right now we're getting a lot of messages saying, I'm talking with my family about how I can best continue to serve the people of Illinois. The subtle way of saying we're looking at it but not making a decision right now.
Got about a minute left, and one of the things we also want to talk about is who might be the Republican candidate. One of the ones that's mentioned most prominently is incumbent Republican Congressman Darren LaHood of Peoria. He's got name recognition. He's been around a long time on the state scene.
He is. He's been a lot more loyal, I think, or aligned with the Trump administration than, say, his more moderate father, Ray LaHood, was. But I also wouldn't count out looking elsewhere, looking at mayors of medium-sized cities, look outside of state government at other areas of politics, county board members who are out there that Republicans have a kind of a shallow bench right now, and they're going to need to bring some people up from non-traditional areas.
lots to keep an eye on in the months and years to come. Thank you so much, Peter Hancock of Capitol News, Illinois.
Thank you.
Democratic House Speaker Pro Tem Cam Buckner of Chicago is our guest on Illinois Lawmakers this week. Good to have you on the program.
It's great to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into legislative matters, one of the state's senior Democratic elected officials yourself, I'd like some of your thoughts about this week's retirement announcement by U.S. Senator Richard Durbin. You worked on the senator's staff for a good number of years.
I did. I spent 6 years of my very early life as a staffer for Senator Durbin, fresh out of college. And it was an incredible opportunity for me, and not only just to be able to learn the ins and outs of the U.S. Senate, but more importantly to learn public service at the knee of Dick Durbin. He's been a friend and a mentor, and I'm excited about what he's meant in my life.
He's still got over a year to serve on his term. What would you say would be his major legislative accomplishment? I know that the smoking ban on airlines kind of got everything started.
Yeah. The smoking ban on airlines is huge. Obviously, his dream of the DREAM Act hadn't really come into full fruition, but when you look at some things we've done with DACA and some of the immigration reform stuff around there, that's really a strong legacy for him. When you look at the fights against folks like Big Pharma, that's Dick Durbin. It has his name written all over it, right? And so the pieces of his legacy will start to come together, and people will start seeing them and talking about them. But I think some of his biggest legacy really is focused on people, right? Veterans and farmers and single mothers and teachers around this state.
I have to turn to things here at the State House as the month of April plays out. We've got roughly 6 weeks left in this session. Still no word on the budget, but I guess we're not really surprised at that because that comes together really quickly after we hear the April revenue figures after all the taxes come in.
Yeah, we're getting there, right? As a budget negotiator, we're spending a lot of time in meetings between the House, the Senate, the governor's office, and we're trying to work through it. Obviously, we're waiting for the COGFA numbers in April. The picture is becoming clearer, and so I have all faith that we are going to land the plane here and be able to bring the people of Illinois a balanced budget that's balanced both economically and morally as well.
Talking about landing the plane, air traffic control still doesn't know a lot about what the Trump administration is going to do in terms of tariffs, what the impact on the Illinois economy is going to be on that. There have been budget rescissions in many areas like health and human services. What kind of unknown does that how does that hang over the whole thing as you and your fellow budgeteers try to put things together?
Yeah, not to quote Donald Rumsfeld, right? But there's the known knowns and the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, right? We're going to work through all of it. Listen, we know that there's instability right now in Washington, and a lot of the stuff we cannot predict. But what we will be able to do is predict certain things and find a way to work through that. So I think the two things that are most important in this budget space for us right now are diligence and vigilance, and we're doing both of those.
One of the other issues I know that has been very high on your radar has been mass transit reform. The various agencies that deal with that in the northeastern part of the state of Illinois and of course the city of Chicago, they're facing a fiscal cliff of something like $770 million because the federal COVID money that they've been using for operations is going to be running out. One of the clear messages I've heard from both parties here at the Capitol is without reform, there will be no new money. Well, what is reform in your mind?
Yeah, to me, reform is both structure and governance, creating a system that works for the people. Right now, the system is very archaic, it's very opaque. There are a lot of different folks who are appointing different people on boards. There's a lot of board members. People don't know who reports to who or where the accountability starts or ends, right? And so for us, for those folks like me who are in that room negotiating that, we want to make sure that we streamline these processes, create a system that works for the people of Northeast Illinois.
Could it be one of the solutions has been to kind of fold everything together to create a new super agency that oversees everything, with the idea being there would be more cost efficiencies, more streamlined, less red tape?
Yeah, well, for us, we've talked about how do we save cost, and create more efficiencies, right? Where's the waste and how can we get around that? And so when we talk about consolidation, it's not necessarily putting everything into one pot. That was once a part of the conversation, but now we're being more fine-tuned, right? What does that look like? How do we make sure that when CTA and PACE are both purchasing electric buses, that they're doing it in a way that creates some economies of scale, right? We've got to be honest in the dollar sense with the people about what we're spending and how we're doing it, and that is part of this conversation that we're having now.
We've got about a half a minute left in the program, and you talked about this, and it's so complex. You look at all the units of local government that's covered by all this. Can you get this wrapped up by May 31st? Are you optimistic?
I truly believe so. I know we're on the clock, and there's a lot going on, but I think we're going to find a way to bring folks together from around the state to understand how important this is, not just to our region where I live, but for the entire state and the entire Midwest. I'm truly optimistic that we'll find a way to get it done.
Well, we're going to hold you to that,
All right.
okay? Democratic House Speaker Pro Tempore Cam Buckner of Chicago, thank you so much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Assistant House Republican Leader Amy Elik of Godfrey joins us next on Illinois Lawmakers. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
You're a spokesperson for the Republican Party in the House General Services Appropriation and Education Policy Committees and a certified public accountant. You're also one of the folks that we call a budgeteer around the Capitol, someone who is known for their knowledge of the state budgeting process. And right now, you're looking at what Governor Pritzker has put before the legislature. That's, I believe, a $55.2 billion spending plan. Was that proposal dead on arrival with the House Republicans?
Not necessarily. I do believe the governor mentioned that he wanted it to be, it was a very careful year of budgeting, and we do agree with that. In fact, we've wanted that carefulness over the past few years and haven't necessarily gotten it. But the carefulness is due to the unknown financial situation with the revenue in Illinois and sort of the lingering effects on our state budget of the pandemic and where are we going to be with revenue. It's always a question, and we will be finding out more in about 2 weeks when the April revenue estimates are released. So we do appreciate that everyone is acknowledging that this is going to be an interesting and tight budget year. So I would say no, it's not dead on arrival.
As you look at, you mentioned the revenue estimates coming out in a couple of weeks. That's from the legislature's bipartisan committee on government forecasting and accountability, COGFA as we call it. This is the set of numbers that'll actually be used to frame the budget because it'll take into account all of the income tax receipts that we received or the state received from corporate and individual income taxes. So that's kind of the last critical look you've got to make any decisions on the budget.
Yes, and we obviously look at those numbers very carefully to determine where they fall in line with what the governor thought that they were going to be when he proposed his budget in February.
There's a lot of uncertainty this year because we don't know how decisions made in Washington by the Trump administration are going to impact things. And one of those has to do with tariffs. There was a joint committee hearing this morning. You remember both committees, the House International Relations, Tourism and Trade Committee, along with the Revenue and Finance Committee, looking at the potential impact of tariffs and how they might impact the state of Illinois' revenue picture. What did you learn this morning?
Sure, we heard first from a University of Illinois professor in economics who did not give a glowing picture of the concept of tariffs whatsoever, while he also, though, agreed that there are other business practices in Illinois that are hurting the general economy of Illinois. The state policy is hurting these business practices in Illinois. So we did spend a fair amount of time also talking about, while tariffs are unknown, how they're going to affect us right now. We don't have control over that in the Illinois legislature. So what we can control, though, is those policies that affect business and make business easier or harder in Illinois. And we as House Republicans believe that we should make it easier to do business in Illinois.
And because of some of these things, we don't know what the impacts will be and we don't know when they may hit. That always, I suppose, leaves open the possibility that you might have to come back into special session, retool the budget, and see how things go as it plays itself out.
That would be possible, and I don't, have a problem with that. If we need to come back and retool, I think that that's healthy, and we should be following those budget decisions as we go along throughout the year. One of the agencies in our General Services Appropriations Committee last night, we asked, how are you, well, we've asked at many different agencies, how are you actually working these unknown things into your budget proposal? And the Department of Natural Resources said, we are assuming at this point in time that the money that's been promised to us or that we have been granted is coming to us. So if something changes in the future, they all may have to retool.
In the last minute or so that we have, I also want to ask about your role as the House Republicans' spokesperson on educational policy. One of the most controversial bills lawmakers have looked at is House Bill 2827 that would tighten up the state's regulation of homeschooling. It's still hung up on third reading. You're opposed to the bill, I know that.
Yes, we have led the opposition, and tens of thousands of families across Illinois have expressed their opposition to this bill. I've actually had very few, I could probably count on one hand, people that have contacted me and said that they're in support of the bill. So as of now, the bill appears to be dead. It has been re-referred to the Rules Committee. However, the sponsor said she was going to be working on it. I'm hearing she's going to be working on it over the summer, but given that it's Springfield, Illinois, and you never really know, and a bill's never really dead, I think people should remain informed and vigilant and keep an eye on all the different advocacy groups, websites, and Facebook pages to make sure that they're aware if it comes back. And we'll, of course, let people know right away.
And we will be covering that issue as it plays itself out in this spring session. Thank you so much. Assistant House Republican Leader Amy Elik. Godfrey, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Here to talk about K through 12 education on Illinois Lawmakers, Democratic State Representative Laura Faver Diaz of Grayslake. She's the Vice Chair of the House Education Policy Committee and chairs the House Educator Shortage Working Group. Good to have you on the program. It's your first time here.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for having me.
One of the most fascinating things I found over the years in doing this program is how lawmakers bring their professional experience to the table as far as what they've done. You taught social studies at the high school level for around 10 years. How does that inform how you approach policy here on the floor of the Illinois House?
So I will always be a teacher. And I still use my teacher lens quite a bit. But I think a shift has happened for me this is my third year. And yes, it is important to always have that teacher perspective, but I'm now a policymaker. And so I need to keep that lens of being a teacher at the forefront, but I also need to look at legislation more comprehensively. How does it impact our students? How does it impact the communities when we make policies? How does it impact administration? How does it impact our state budget? So while I will always have that teacher lens, and actually my experience as a teacher, I taught in very under-resourced, high-poverty schools, and that experience, and then at the end of my 10 years, I taught in an amazing, highly resourced school. And so having these two differences and seeing the differences in the way funding impacts not only teacher experience, but student experience, I will always have that with me. And that was a major driver of why I decided to run. But I think I have definitely evolved in coming in as a teacher to now a policymaker. And I think it's important that we look at education policy comprehensively.
Having come from the teacher ranks, you've seen firsthand that Illinois, of course, is facing a critical shortage of fellow teachers in the classrooms. There's a study out from last year's figures from the Illinois Association of Regional Superintendents of Schools that shows 87% of the state's 750 school districts have a teacher shortage problem. How is that manifesting itself as you go from district to district across the state?
Yeah, so we know since 2011, as you said, that we have seen a drastic and continual teacher shortage issue, but we know it doesn't impact all districts equally. We know where high poverty school districts or school districts with majority students of color are particularly impacted, as well as we know there are specific shortage areas. So special education, bilingual education. So it is a teacher shortage, but it is not equally distributed. And that is something that I think is really important to keep in mind. Not only do we have a teacher shortage, but we also have an acute teacher of color shortage. So 54% of Illinois students are students of color, but our teacher demographic makeup, only 18% of teachers are teachers of color. And studies show that when teachers of color are in the classroom, all students actually perform better. There are benefits for all students, but particularly for students of color. So it is not an equal problem. It is a problem for everyone, but it is not an equal problem.
When I was a kid, being a school teacher was one of the most respected and one of the most dependable forms of income. It was really one of the highly sought after professional positions in any community. But demographics can only account for some of it. I'm hearing a lot of this has to do with morale amongst the teachers who are still there. And when people look at the pay over the course of time, the pensions and everything, they go, I'm not so sure I want to do this.
Absolutely. So we have, and that's where we have to be thoughtful about the legislation that we pass here out of the General Assembly, how it impacts that morale in the classroom. Are teachers being supported? Are our teacher education programs adequately and effectively preparing teachers for the classroom? And then of course, like looking at our tier 2 pensions and how that has impacted that shift, how it has impacted teachers' ability to save, and all educators, frankly, paraprofessionals as well. And in the educator shortage working group, we are looking at the teacher vacancy issue, but we're also looking at, we know we have a school psychologist shortage, a school social worker shortage, a school counselor shortage, a
bus
school
driver shortages.
Exactly. And so it's important that we look at this comprehensively and how all of those things, like you said, morale, support, payment, pensions impact people's decisions to stay.
We're going to have to stay tuned. Representative, thank you so much. Representative Laura Faver Diaz of Grayslake, certainly wonderful to have you on the program.
Thank you.
House Republican Floor Leader Patrick Windhorst of Metropolis joins us now on Illinois Lawmakers. The subject is ethics reform. Good to have you back on the program, sir.
Great to be here. Thank you.
House Republicans are refocusing on this issue again this spring. You had the guilty verdicts earlier in former Speaker Michael Madigan's trial on corruption charges in federal court at the Dirksen building earlier this spring. One of many corruption cases with their roots here at the State House. You're the current member of the House Judiciary, Criminal Law, Restorative Justice, and Ethics and Elections Committees. You've got a number of bills you're starting with. What's the first one here? This basically says lawmakers should not be also serving as lobbyists at the same time, lobbyists for local and state governments. What's the genesis of all this, Pat?
Well, we have had a ban that prohibits lawmakers from lobbying state government. That is obvious and should be a ban. However, there has been a practice where lawmakers are lobbying local governments. We attempted 3 years ago to put a ban into practice, or into place rather, in the law. That ban was weak. It still had many loopholes that allows that lobbying practice to go on. To me, having lawmakers lobby local governments is an undue influence on those local governments. Individuals who are in local government look to lawmakers to help them in Springfield, but if they're also being lobbied on other matters, that presents a conflict, in my opinion.
Well, and the lawmaker is also in the position of passing laws that can directly impact what a local village or township can actually do, or what they want.
And we need a clean break. Lawmakers should be focused on making the laws, not lobbying local governments.
There's another part of this, House Bill 1382, and this gives the Legislative Inspector General's office the actual power to subpoena lawmakers and evidence in cases that involve potential misconduct by members of the General Assembly. This isn't widely known to members of the public, but what is this office supposed to do?
Well, the Legislative Inspector General, along with the Legislative Ethics Commission, is charged with investigating allegations of ethical violations among legislators. The Legislative Inspector General has an active role in that process, obviously. About 3 years ago, I mentioned ethics reform that we did put forward. There were some provisions in there dealing with the Legislative Inspector General, but the LIG, as we refer to it colloquially, at the time actually resigned in response to that legislation because she felt like it wasn't strong enough. It made her position a paper tiger. So what we hope with this legislation is to give broader authority to the Legislative Inspector General. That way that individual can do his job and conduct investigations as he sees fit.
So what does giving them the power of subpoena do for them as far as collecting evidence?
So as it exists now, the LIG has to request from the Ethics Commission, which is made up of legislators, has to request that subpoena from them. This would allow the LIG to have power on his own to subpoena documents and records that may be needed for the investigation. That way there's not a conflict where an LIG is needing documents, but legislators are telling him he can't have them.
Up next is House Bill 1385. It closes the loophole between, it's the revolving door that allows a lawmaker to be a lawmaker one day and the next day go out and start working for a group that their committee was regulating the day before.
That's right. We have a pretty weak revolving door provision in our law. It's basically a 6-month provision, meaning you have to wait 6 months after leaving the legislature to be a lobbyist to lobby the General Assembly. However, there is a pretty big loophole. That 6 months expires at the end of the General Assembly. So if you do not run for re-election, you leave your position the next day after the new General Assembly is sworn in, you're eligible to be a lobbyist.
Some states around us make you wait at least a year before you do that. How long would you want it to be?
I think a year is appropriate. I'm willing to go up to 2 or 3 years, but we need to strengthen that so it's a year from leaving service, not just when the General Assembly ends, because that's too big of a loophole.
We've got about a minute left. There's one that's interesting. It bans public officials, this is House Bill 1554, bans public officials from using campaign funds for their own legal defense. What's the problem with that?
Well, what we see is politicians, lawmakers building up their campaign accounts and actually getting money from PACs and other individuals and spending that then on their legal defense rather than the intended use of the contribution, which was to a campaign or to seek election. The tying in of campaign contributions and criminal activity needs to be separated. In the last couple of seconds we have, these bills, where do they stand in terms of the legislative calendar? Well, they are now all referred back to rules, meaning they're starting over. However, in the Ethics and Elections Committee, my understanding from the chairman is we will see an ethics bill come forward. My hope is that these bills are considered for a larger ethics package.
Thanks very much. House Republican Floor Leader Patrick Windhorst of Metropolis, we appreciate your time.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Illinois Lawmakers continues. I'm Jak Tichenor along with Peter Hancock of Capital News, Illinois. Peter, we're still waiting to see if the House sponsor is going to try to move the Home School Act back to the House floor in days to come. What are you hearing?
At this point, not much. The Senate has been out this week. The House has been mainly in committee hearings, very little floor action really. That is obviously a very sensitive issue, and I think people are just being very cautious about it, just trying to see where the political winds are blowing on that one right now.
The House sponsor, Representative Tara Costa-Howard, has been reportedly doing some fine-tuning behind the scenes to see if she can garner the 60 votes to get it back out and have a chance of passing on the floor.
Yeah, and this is what often happens with legislation. I mean, I think her main concern is to make sure that homeschooling is not used as a convenient cover for child abuse or neglect, while at the same time there are many very sincere, very dedicated homeschoolers who take that job very seriously, who don't feel a need for a whole lot of state oversight. So it's balancing two very strong emotions, and trying to find a middle ground on that.
Got about a half a minute left. I don't remember in recent memory the number of witness slips that's been filed on this bill. This has been tremendously controversial.
It's been in the tens of thousands, and we're also always very cautious about citing those numbers because there are all kinds of ways to do that automatically, but it's clearly generating a lot of public interest.
We'll keep focused on that in weeks to come. Peter Hancock of Capital News Illinois, thank you always for your expertise. That is it for this week's edition of Illinois Lawmakers. We'll be back next week. So long from Springfield.